boat on the front and the middle up to the chain in between the two buoys. And we were throwing as far as we could throw into that area, just in the slack water off from where the generators would go. And I discovered there was a hump of rocks that went up about 6 foot in that area where we were fishing. Every time we went over that hump, we'd either get a 17-inch smallmouth, a 24, 25-inch walleye, or a 26 or 27-inch northern, just every time. And about 2 times out of 4, we would snag the rocks. So I was trying to figure out what to do. At the time, Thrill made a bobber, which was called a castable bobber. It was a little bit different shape than this one here. It was more of an oval shape, and it was heavily weighted. It was made out of plastic instead of balsa or styrofoam like most of the bobbers are now. They no longer make that bobber. So what I did is I took the regular bobber, I put a couple nuts on the shaft with an O-ring, holding them on, and I can weight that however I want. Because what you want is that bobber sitting down, you know, far enough that you know, the fish don't feel as much resistance on it when they bite. So the way I would rig up is to take an 1/8 ounce jig head at the bottom, a little bit of split shot, and then you can adjust your bobber stop however you want. I was adjusting it so that it would go 6 foot right over the top of that reef every time. And we had 3 days of unbelievable fishing for walleye and smallmouth. This has got bobber stops on it, which are the black bobber stop. I didn't realize it for the first few years that I used these things, that they are sized for the line size. The black ones are for like 4 and 6 pound test. And the red ones that you see commonly are for a bigger line size. So if you put the bigger ones on, they don't hold as well.
Oh,
These are rubber stoppers?
These are the rubber stoppers, and I'll pass this around. But, and you can even double those up, which is what I've done here, and it holds better. But these black ones, I can use them for a week before they start to slip on me.
What kind of line you got on your rod? And then
I've got braided line and then fluorocarbon. I put plenty of fluorocarbon so that wherever I'm going to fish, I know I can get clear down with the fluorocarbon. The bobber stop, the rubber ones will not work well on the braided line. I've got the other setup here that I've got the regular knotted type bobber stops on there. Those work better for the braided lines on there. Now this is something I haven't tried yet.
one thing here, Wayne, this bottom one, you use that religiously, or does
The slip bobber or the
split shot?
split shot, no.
You don't,
I don't really use it a whole lot.
because
I
there's the
just put
upper
that on
one and
there.
the bottom and the lower one, but you just put it for,
I put it for show there.
okay, there.
A lot of times if the wind comes up, I need more weight, and that's when I put the split shot on. So that's kind of rigged for more of a weighted or a wind situation. I did discover when I was researching these bobbers, trying to find the old Thrill built bobber that I liked, which I never found, that they are sized by the size of lure that you want below it. Because the ideal, you don't want the bobber to lay flat in the water, you want it straight up. And you want to be able to see it, so you don't want it to go down too far. But they rate them an 1/8 ounce, 1/4 ounce, or no, 3/16 of an ounce, 8 ounce, and 3/8 of an ounce. So that's your lure, your bait, everything included on that. And they used to make a bobber which was a little bit bigger, I'd say, which might have handled up to 1/2 ounce, which was good because you get a big jumbo leech on there and an 1/8 ounce weight, and it'll pull some of those other bobbers under. This is something I discovered at Walmart. It's made by South Bend. Pass that around there. Made by South Bend. It's probably intended more for ocean type fishing, but I thought in a real heavy wind condition, this might work. And that's why I put this rig on, just to show you what you could use there. I always put the slip bobber on with a little bead on it. Probably doesn't matter the color. And then this one's got a little gold 1/8 ounce on it, which works pretty well for me also. So with that type of fishing, you can have a very small box. You don't even need one hardly this big. You know, a few bobbers, some beads, the rubber bobber stops come in something like this, which you get a dozen or so on there, and all you do is put the first thing that goes on is your bobber stop. If you forget it, then you're tearing everything apart again. But you put your line through the loop and pull the bobber stop right onto the line. They work really slow.
Have you found these a pencil weight versus a teardrop, any difference throughout the summer? Early, dead summer, late, fall?
Crappie fishing, I always use pencil weights. When I do the walleyes or the largemouth bass, the bigger bobber works pretty well. I really like the oval ones better. I see that Thrill makes a Pro Series. They call it Pro Series something Mille Lacs. It's actually made to work at Mille Lacs because of the wind. It's a longer, thinner. It's about half the thickness of that big one that I passed around. I think it's made of balsa, and because it's a pencil, the wind goes through it, so it's not gonna. You get a windy situation, your float goes right over it sideways. So, and you want it to stay straight up, and you want to be able to see it. So they have a special series now that they make, and I guess Jack's has those there at the store. The other situation I got into when Denny Cox and I fished Mille Lacs with the club the first time. We had a really good day. We located a reef that was about 5.5 foot down below. The water was so clear, I looked over the side and I could count the zebra mussels on the rocks. And so the water was really clear. I knew the fish were seeing us, and that's why we weren't getting anything. We backed off, tried to fish across the rocks. We got snagged up. They were so heavy, and they were covered with the zebra mussels, which really snag you up and cut your line off. So I went to this bobber system. We actually went and spot locked right on top of that 5.5 foot rock pile and fished off threw off to the north. And we ended up that day with, I had 17 smallmouth. The smallest was 17 inches, and I got my biggest smallmouth, which was 22 that day. And then the sun went under the clouds in the afternoon. We went to that same spot, and the walleyes were all there. 17 and 18-inch walleyes all day long there. And I think we had,
I had 20 something. You're going to share that GPS coordinate?
Number 169.
Well, it was on what? It was on Miramar?
It was on West Miramar Reef. The funny thing is that we parked our boat at the marina there, and the guy had a launch, and he would take people out and fish with them for the day or whatever. When we were coming back in, he was going out one day, and the first place that he stopped was where we were. It It was only like probably, I would say 200 yards, 300 yards off the marina. It shows up really well on your locator because it's just a circle. Looks like a 1/2-inch blue circle, you know, on your chart, which everywhere else was land. And I'm wondering, why are they showing, you know, land out there? And that's why I started out towards that area and creeped up to it real slowly and finally found the rock pile. So maybe when the water was really low and they charted that, that showed up as a, you know, a rock reef or coming out of the water.
You got questions?
Good. Thank
Well,
you.
this is a comment, I mean, I use lighted bobber setups on top of that same bobber. You ever do
The
that?
lighted bobbers, the light bright will work for throwing and doing that.
I'm saying you can use that same bobber, right, put these glow stick lights on it. So if you're rigging that up, if you put
Yeah,
little rubber ring system on your bobber
Yeah.
to start with,
yeah,
and you carry that little pack of little sticks,
yeah, that would work.
and you pop the little sticks and put them on it. You don't need to buy it. We used to always buy lighted bobbers for night fishing and
Yeah,
stuff too,
yeah.
but they're expensive, they don't look as
Yeah.
well with that
Joe,
little stick.
okay, did you get this?
Yeah, about $6 or $7
What's
a
the-
pop for those lighted bobbers anymore. Yeah,
They don't float as well.
yeah, yeah.
So Wayne,
Yes.
I'll show my ignorance. I've never used bobbers like this.
Mhm.
Are these only really, I mean, I use regular bobbers,
Yeah,
but these are really advantageous if you're gonna fish in water deeper than 6 feet, right?
the advantageous part of it is that you can cast those. At Mille Lacs, for instance, where we were, we found that we had to be able to cast the full distance we could with our rod, probably 75 or 100 foot from the boat. If we got 25 feet out, it was game off. You know, we wouldn't get any fish. We had to get clear out from the boat. We actually had a Bass Pro in a $100,000 boat that circled around us for probably an hour or better, trying to catch a fish. He saw us pulling all those in. He pulled one smallmouth in the whole time we were there. So we were right on, you know, what we needed to do with that. He casted every hard bait that he had, and they were not biting on hard baits. The presentation is you had to get as far from the boat as you could because the water was clear and bring it back, you know, slow, and they just absolutely nailed it. We had probably the best day of fishing that I've ever had there. Yeah.
Well, anyway, Wayne made a believer out of me, and I set up a bobber system much like what he's got. And I didn't have to set as far off as what you're talking about. But
It varies.
just, you know, you're flipping it back there 20, 30 feet, and it's just awful fun just to watch the bobber.
Yeah,
And when it goes down, you just do a sweep set, and it works, it really works well.
yeah,
And it's a very minimal setup, easy to, once you get used to rigging, it's very easy to do. I use, instead of what he uses, I use a 6-foot fluorocarbon Snell. And they sell them right there at the bait shops. It's got probably a number, I don't know what size hook it'd be, probably a number 7 or 8. Northland Tackle makes them.
yeah.
But I put a swivel with a, you know, a snap, and I can just put those leaders on with the fluorocarbon leader, and that works well. I don't know.
Great way
You
to
like,
fish 30, 35 feet deep, you know.
sure, now he fished very shallow. I fished probably in about as much as 14 feet of water.
That's about where we were, actually. We were parked on the reef and we were throwing out in, you know, in the lower area there and pulling it up. And I could vary it according to how deep I wanted it to go with the bobber stop on there, so that as it was coming up towards the rock pile, that's where they were sitting.
Yeah.
One other thing I discovered, the toughest thing about slip bobber fishing is to get the line through here.
Forget it if you're using, braid.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Braid won't
yeah.
push through there.
But I discovered an easy way to do this. You start the line through as far as you can go. You suck on that and you'll pull that line right through that. It's amazing. As long as you've got a good straight, you don't want it curved or whatever, cut it off so that, there's no extra. But if you suck on that, you can actually pull that right through there.
How the hell did you discover that?
I was gonna ask.
The boat was going like this. One day the wind was blowing. I couldn't even hardly hit the end. I'm sitting on Pepin fishing and we tried it over a perch pole that we do. And, Denny wanted me to rig one up for him because, he was going like this. He couldn't get it. So you try it. And I don't know, it just hit me.
Wasn't
But it
in,
really works.
wasn't in fisherman or anything?
Uh-uh.
Oh,
Mike Ferguson, you were with me. Do you have any comments about the bobber fishing?
No, I mean, it did well with it. I was just thinking about his thing. I mean, that would be a hard one to explain when you got to the ER and you had that string in your throat.
Yeah.
talk about a snake.
These go around everywhere.
I believe so. Okay, any other questions? All right, well, Wayne, thank you for. Stan, do you want to take it from here? Stan Hannes?
Crazy.
Okay, in regards to minimal fishing or minimal fish equipment, I thought, okay, how do you cover the water column from the bottom on up with minimal equipment? And I've got 4 rigs that I rigged up. The first one is just a hook and a barrel sinker. And below the barrel sinker, I tied on a uni knot and then a little bead, and that keeps that barrel sinker from sliding onto the shank of the hook. And I've had good luck with this with bluegills, panfish, and the bait is right on the bottom. And this pole is an old fly rod pole that I had, and I cut off the reel seat and mounted a spinning rod seat. And so I put a spinning rod on it, and it's very touchy. I really like it. You can't cast very far with this because of the fly rod guides farther up. I did add a regular spinning guide here, but if you're vertical fishing, works like a charm.
Is that a fiberglass?
It's an old rod, yeah, I don't know.
I suppose.
Competition.
Okay. The next outfit I have, and you had a pretty good presentation last week on the drop shot rig. And I use the drop shot rig quite a bit and have had pretty good luck with it. I didn't put a sinker on the end of that because it tangles up really good, but here's a tungsten drop shot sinker. And this is a 1/4 ounce weight. And the advantage of the shape is that it hopefully doesn't get snagged up very easily. And to attach it to your line, there's a little wire gizmo on the end of it that's wide at the bottom and narrow at the top. And you simply put your line through that loop and snug it up tight, and that sinker stays on. Okay, so that's a drop shot sinker, but you don't have to have a drop shot sinker. You can use any sinker, and even if you have some heavier split shot, you could pinch on a couple of your heavier split shot, but not real tight. And then if you get snagged up, hopefully they'll strip off and you save your rig. Okay, but I've had real good luck with the drop shot outfit. And you want to rig it so your hook point or your bend of your hook is up and not down. Okay, and this rod is a 2 to 4 pound. I ordered it from 8 Rivers. 8 Rivers, and it's a very sensitive rod. I really like it. So that gets you a little bit off the bottom. You can set your drop shot for 6 inches or 2 inches or on up to a foot, 2 feet, however you want to do it. The next outfit I have is the slip bobber, just as Wayne presented. I gave a presentation last year on bobbers, and there's a small world of bobbers out there and bobber stops. There's a lot of different kinds of bobber stops. What I like to do, I just use a uni knot, and I tie a uni knot up above my bobber. So you don't, if you forget, if that's a, if you have some heavier fishing line and you rig your slip bobber up and you forget to put that bobber stop on, if you have some heavier line, you can cut a section of that off and tie a uni knot, and that'll serve as your bobber stop. Works good for me. I have to apologize just a little bit if you notice the tip of this rod. This is a custom built Jim Tro rod. Very nice rod. I really like it. But I was tarping my boat last fall by myself, and I was on one side, the rods were in the boat, and I pulled on the tarp, and the far side of the tarp fell in the boat, and I walked around, pulled on the other side, and the rod tip caught in the fold of the tarp, and I broke the end of it off. So
He guaranteed that.
yeah, well, it was operator error, I think, on that one. Yeah, but this rod is 2 to 6 pounds as well, and it really casts a mind. I think because of all the eyelets that Jim put on there, but very nice. I really like it.
Did you notice that it's black and gold? That's why it didn't stand up.
You would bring that up.
Yeah, none of that.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'd like to show, if I had hardly any money and I wanted to buy one lure, it would be a jig. Okay. And for suspended fish on up to very close to the surface, you can rig a jig with a worm or a night crawler or a leech, or I put a tube on here, a tube jig thing, and then you can add a clip-on bobber or not. And so this rig you can cast without the bobber, reel in slowly. Sometimes I'll tie with a Palomar knot, I'll tie 2 jigs on, one a couple 3 feet above the bottom one, and you've got a little extra weight to cast with if you're not using a bobber. You can cast this out, reel in slow, or if the fish are cooperating with you, you can put a bobber on, set it to any depth you want, as long as it's not 6 or 8 feet. That's where your slip bobber would come into play. But this is a way to catch fish that are shallow. So 4 different levels in the water column works for me. This rod is a St. Croix. 2 to 6 pounds again.
That's a good grandpa rod for taking grand.
Okay, yeah, for kids to get started, that's great. And I usually use, I don't know, 8 or 10 pound fluorocarbon or braid, and then tie on a fluorocarbon leader with a double uni knot. So.
Anybody have questions?
One of the things that I've had trouble with, at least on slip bobbers, is if you use a real light hook at the end, trying to get it down so that it actually affects the bobber. So I see, well, this is not the right.
Yeah.
That one has a split shot on it. So do you use that?
Yeah, to get your bait down. Actually, if you get a good strong minnow and you don't have any weight down there, that minnow will try to come up to the surface every time. So you almost have to use some sort of weight. A small split shot probably solve that problem.
The 8-ounce jig usually will take that down with the minnow on it, with the slip bobber.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing that. And then when we were at the Mille Lacs trip, and we had that fishing pro that came in and talked to us there.
Yep.
He was saying about putting a 8-ounce jig on it. So then I knew I was doing it right. I've done that for years.
Well, I was thinking about the fishing line deal that we talked about a couple weeks ago, and monofilament will float.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you use monofilament, so I didn't know if any of these rigs use monofilament. It's harder to get your jig down And just realize that if it's braid, it's pretty tough. If it's monofilament, it's pretty tough, but if you use floral, it sinks. So
Yeah,
that would help it.
I exclusively always use fluorocarbon
Yeah.
anymore.
Now, one more thing with the drop shot, I found if there's not much wind and you're fishing 10 or 12 feet, a quarter ounce weight will usually work just fine. And if it's a little windier, or you're fishing a little deeper, I go to a 3/8 ounce. So that's kind of the range of weight that I use, a quarter or 3/8. And it's like last fall, we were up in Canada and the fish are 40 feet deep. Walleyes were, I went to a half ounce drop shot rig and tried that. It worked, but not as well as the rig that you pull behind you. The bottom bouncer. The bottom bouncer worked better. So anyways.
After the meeting, Stan and Wayne and John will probably stick around if you want to look at the rods a little closer and ask questions, if you guys would stay just a few minutes. Any other questions of Stan? Thank you. Yes.
I have a minimalist story for you.
Okay.
Probably 50 years ago, I was on vacation with my folks. They have some relatives that live right next to Cody, Wyoming, in the Alkali Flats. And one day we visiting, said, let's go trout fishing. So my dad is always interested in fishing. Walked out in what they call the pasture, where you didn't have any green in it, but he got out to the edge. It was just an irrigation ditch. What it was. Got to the edge of that. He got his pocket and got his pocket knife off. Got a willow switch off. Got in the other pocket. Had a gob of grocery string in his pocket. Tied that on the willow switch. Had a lug nut. He tied on and a safety pin. No kidding. And caught a grasshopper and went poof like that. And caught a trout. Caught trout as fast as you could throw the line. But that was as minimalist as anybody I. What weight was the nut? Well, it was was it tungsten?
You can only use a 1938 Ford lug nut.
If you've ever been in that country and know anybody in the rural part of it, they didn't have any extra money to do anything with it.
Interesting. Okay, any other questions for Stan? Stan, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, John Mueller, you've got a little hurdle here to jump. You got two good presentations to live up to.
Well, Lee contacted me about doing Minimalist. I don't know what he was thinking about the way I fish or not, but I think he was probably leaning more towards the boat that I use for fishing in. I got a 1973 Lund Tri-Hull. I don't know if you guys get the county paper, but it's been in there a few times. But I have a 99 Mariner gas motor, a 40-pound thrust portable Minn Kota trolling motor that doesn't have spot lock on it. I got 2 anchors in the boat, so I don't have any other way of keeping still other than dropping anchors. I've got a 560 Hummingbird portable depth finder, and it's on a Shorelander trailer. It's just comfortable to ride in. I don't know if some of you guys in here have rode with me before. It's just easy to sit in. You can stand up in it, you can walk around in it, and it won't tip over. It's handy because I can load it by myself and unload it by myself. I pull it up on the trailer and I can take it to Ada Hayden, which very few people can do.
Can me or Ron Ratliff ride in that?
Ron has been in it.
Oh, Ron has.
Yes, Ron has been in it. He caught a nice wiper up at Ada Hayden one day when he was with me. So
Sit down.
I don't have a live well in it. Got a fish basket. And a friend of mine built a little rod, extends out over the water, and you put it in your oar lock, and you can just throw your fish in there and keep it fresh all day if you want to take fish. A lot of times I take a cooler for transport and throw a ice pack or something in that for hauling them home so they don't go bad on you. Rods and reels. I like Fenwick, one of my favorite rods. They're not expensive, not the real fancy ones. Shimano Fluger reels. Again, that's not the high grade reels. It's pretty basic. You don't have a lot of money wrapped up in them, and they seem to last quite a long. The only thing is bail springs sometimes go out on them, and then you just got to throw away and go spend $30 and go buy another one. Line. I fish for crappie, trout. If a basket's on my line, it's usually by accident, but they're fun to catch. But I would kind of target crappie, bluegill, and trout. So I use monofilament line rather than braid. I usually use 4 to 6 pound test line. Denny and I have learned that if you use 4 pound tests for trout, they can break your line. So especially when you're trying to unhook them from there and not keep them, is that you pull them up over the edge of the boat. A lot of times, sometimes you can break 4 pound test line. So we use a lot of 6 pound test line, and since we don't keep fish very often, we finally realized that we don't even take them out of the water anymore. We just reach over the edge of the boat with the pliers, grab the hook, turn it, and off they go. Don't touch it. So we're trying not to injure the fish, a lot of fish that we use. A lot of jig fishing. I'll pass around some jigs that Denny makes that we use for trout. Size is 132 for crappie, and we usually use 8 ounce jigs for trout. I don't use quarters very often, but Danny uses them once in a while and catches some fish on them. We usually tip them with crawlers, Crappie Niblets. I'm going to pass this around. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this. It's a power bait by Berkeley. It's called Crappie Niblets. You open these up, put them on a newspaper overnight, let them harden up a little bit so they stay on your line. Fantastic crappies. If you don't want to deal with minnows, you have to worry about what do you do with minnows at the end of the day. What are you going to do? You have to dump on the grass. You got to take them home, try to keep them alive. I find that these crappie niblets just work just as good as minnows. Well, to me they do, because I use them. And I'll just kind of pass that around. I want to take a look at that. You can pick those up at Walmart for $5, and that'll last you the whole season. Yeah. So there you're not spending a lot of money on bait. So what I have here before I pass that.
They must have some kind of scent, don't they?
Yeah, they're very, they're full of scent. So, but they don't work through the ice, which I can't understand. I've used them for ice fishing, and they don't work too good.
One thing, they stain the heck out of your carpet in your boat.
Well, yeah, you want to be careful not to drop them on your carpet, but 73 blonde with a fiberglass base, I don't worry about it.
I'm getting to that point.
When I get home at night, I just take the little hand vac and pick up all the worm stuff and everything else that's in the bottom of my boat and clean it up pretty fast. The types of fishing that I do, just about everything. I like to cast a vertical jig, slow troll for crappies. If I find crappies that are in a particular area, I'll back off anchor to them and cast to them with 2 jigs. One technique I use for trolling is 2 jigs on the same line. Just separate them about a foot and a half. If you watch your depth finder and you see the fish coming through at 12 feet, rather than 10 or 9 feet, you might want to put a 16th ounce jig on the bottom of the jig and the 32nd on top. Get you down a little deeper. I find as slow as you control, the better with crappies. Don't speed troll them with jigs. They like it nice and slow. I use slip bobber rigs once in a while down at Big Creek. The main reason I do that is so I don't lose all my gear. I like to fish brush piles, and so I'll anchor off a brush pile and throw a slip bobber on. My rig's a little bit different than the ones that came around here. I use a barrel swivel with a little egg sinker that pulls the line through. I don't know if you kind of visualize that, but just a little bit different technique, but it works fine. They all work real good. I like it if I'm fishing shallow water and I don't want to spook the fish away from me. So that's why I use slip bobber. These are some, I'll pass these around. Those are some tube jigs. The black and chartreuse is my favorite. I use it almost exclusively. One of my jigs is going to have that on because I've had the most success with it, basically. But you vary the color, doesn't matter. I mean, it can help your fishing out a little bit. This is, I'm going to pass this around rather than, I don't know if any of you guys have seen anything that looks like this piece of metal that's bent with a treble hook on it.
Super duper.
But it's called super duper. And I don't know how many trout Danny and I have caught them on Ada Hayden, but if we're casting artificials, this is what we throw. And throw a mep spinner. I even got some, this is a jig and wrap, small jig and wrap.
Oh, no kidding.
Wow. So again, you can jig that straight up and down. I'll pass this around. You can take a look at these jigs here. Danny makes these jigs in his basement, and we catch everything on them. We do a lot of times put a piece of worm on them, and I don't know if they're attracted. They attracted to the looks of it or whatever it is. We think it's kind of a crayfish look to it, but tipping it off with a little bit of night crawler helps a lot, and we catch a lot of bass. I don't know if Denny remembers how many wipers we caught. 35 last year.
Biggest was what,
26 feet inches.
26 inches. Nice fish.
And trout, I don't know, we lost count. But this is called a pelkey, or a, oh, there's another name for it, I can't remember right now, but you can jig those up off the bottom too, vertical jig them. Real small. I use them for ice fishing once in a while. Works pretty good. But I'll just kind of pass that around. I don't know about minimalized fishing. Danny and I go a lot. I mean, we don't get fish every time we go fishing. But we do go a lot, and we fish farm ponds along with other lakes, and we bank fish. Max is with us sometimes, and Don. We have a great time. As soon as they stock these trout in 8 here in the next couple of weeks, we'll put a bobber on and a wet fly or a small jig, wax worm. The little red worms work pretty good for the trout. And heck, they're just swimming by you. I mean, you can see them. So just cast ahead of them, and they'll come into it. And all of a sudden, the old bobber will just start sliding away. And we have a good time doing that. Farm ponds, the same thing. We walk around. We don't take a boat on. So it's very simple fishing. And sometimes we cast jigs, and sometimes we put a bobber on. So,
Don,
Getting back to your catch and release, fishing, not even bringing the fish out of the water. I get a couple fly fishing catalogs and there's a small world of barbless hooks out there. I'm just wondering, has anybody used barbless hooks and how does that work? I mean, I would think the release would be a lot easier.
Well,
Or do
what
they
you
get
can do
away?
is just take your pliers and bend your hook down
Right,
on your jig, kind of makes it barbless.
but does that work pretty
Yeah, that
well?
works pretty good, because nothing's worse than to kill a fish when you're not planning on taking them home. You know, I hate to see them floating out there in the water. You know, I hate to see that, so, and
I just wondered if anybody had tried barbless hooks, how they work.
I did fishing, steelhead out west. Problem is with barbless, you've got to be darn sure that you keep tension on the line because they'll get off very easily. But you can just, crimp down your barb.
Here's the barb, yeah.
Yeah.
I fish with Ron Smith in my boat, and he only uses barbless hooks. And he's right, as long as you don't pump it or do some other things to give him slack, he catches most of the fish.
some of the fish, Danny and I spent a lot of time out at Ada Hayden. Don Williams was good a couple years ago. It hasn't been good the last year or so. I don't know if the shad population has gotten so bad in there that's really affected the crappie fishing, for me anyway. I know Daryl does a lot of fishing over there too and catches some nice fish. Dakins, I haven't been there for a while, but it's a nice little lake, but it's not very big. Big Creek, I'm really excited about Big Creek this year. Probably nobody in this room is but me, but through the ice, we caught some really nice bluegills. And they're fat and they're not full of worms and they're good eating. And if you want to go down and get a mess of them, all you got to do is find a brush pile, 11 feet of water or less, and either use a slip bobber, just a piece of worm on a jig, cast to them. I think it's going to be fantastic. I also think there's some 12 and 13-inch crappies down there if you find them.
Where, John?
Big Creek.
Oh, Big Creek.
I just think they're there, and I've seen pictures of some of the big ones that people have been catching. And the thing is, be mobile. Don't stay in one spot very long. If you don't see them on your depth finder, don't move on. You know, that's common knowledge. Again, I got a very simple depth finder, and I knew the new Panoptics. It gives you a little bit better view of what's going on around you rather than just below you. I'm watching that depth finder. I know a lot of you guys do the same thing. I'm watching that 24/7. I mean, I'm watching as I go across the lake, I know as I'm trolling, and if I see fish, I get excited. And I don't always know what I'm looking at, but at least I know there's something down there. It might be carp, but and at least I'm gonna try to see what I have, whether it's crappie or jig fishing or night crawler or whatever. I'm gonna try to get them to bite. If they don't get them to bite, I'm gonna assume they're carp. But I don't, like I say, that's the way we fish. And we fish locally. We don't do a lot of long distance fishing. I would like to spend more time up at Brushy this year. I think it's full of fish. The only ways I catch fish up there is a slip bobber rig right below a big tree, because you can't cast out. And what really worked good last year was those little pelkies. You put a little piece of worm on a pelkey and get in the weeds, you can catch some pretty decent perch. But, my problem with Brushy is it's 50 miles too far away from Ames. I like to go, like Denny, we get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, we're on the lake before sunrise. By 10 o'clock, we're done fishing. But we go 7 days a week. You know, so we're out there almost every day that the weather will let us fish. So, you have any questions?
John, when you put your piece of worm on, do you thread it on, or do you do a kind of a wacky worm approach right through the middle, and you got two pieces hanging off the side?
I just go right through it. I only put on about 1.5 inches. I don't give them a lot.
Yeah.
Give them, they come up, they smell that thing and see it. But I don't thread it. I want to move it.
Right.
Yeah, so I leave a little tail about 1 inch sticking out so that it's wiggling. And that on the jig, I think makes a difference. Do you have any comments on that, Danny? But yeah, we use a lot of live bait. I suppose it's cheap.
How about mealworms? I know.
Oh, yeah, they definitely use mealworms, and we've really gotten into that this last couple of years. It seems like it works really good. Danny always has a real good supply of mealworms with him, and we try everything, anything that works. But the biggest thing is find the fish and try to figure out how to catch them. And of course, we prefer jig fishing because we like the strike. We like you guys all know that feeling when you feel that smack on the end of that rod. It gets you excited. So that's how we fish most of the time. That's all I've got, guys.
Anything else? Anybody?
John, do you know out of Ada Hayden, do they stock regularly other than trout? I know trout they brought.
They put some catfish in here a couple years ago. Wipers, I think they put in there. Last year they put in another bunch of wipers. So I don't know how big they are getting, but in the summertime, when it gets around July, when everybody else is going down to sail wheel running crankbaits, the wipers go crazy up here. And we go out there, try to chase them around, it's pathetic. Can't catch up with them with electric motor. But we're gonna try something new this year. Les got us to put a bobber down and sit and wait for them to come and cast out to them and talk about fun. Okay, that's just a blast, especially on 6-pound test line. You get a 24-inch wiper and he'll just tear you out. So really enjoy it. Anything else?
Yeah, the famous line is, as the line is stripping out, you get your drag set, and John, follow that fish. Before I run out of line.
Yeah, so we have to chase them down. But,
Good problem to have.
we had a 34 and a 31-inch catfish. They weighed about 25 pounds each.
It was a half-hour, the big one was a half-hour fight.
Yeah.
Clear across the lake.
Yeah, so and in the summertime.
On jigs, and what'd you say?
Yeah, same
we
jig,
caught
just
everything
jig
out
and
there
worm.
on jigs, every species out there.
Yeah, every species out there. And it's been a lot of fun the last couple of years out there. We're catching trout that have been in the lake for 2 or 3 years. And pretty good sized fish. All right.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
I especially wanted to have this presentation. Bass Pro would not exist if Denny and John were their customers. I marveled when I opened that box. I could probably pull a 1970 box and it would be very similar to what you got. I think some of my first lures were like inline spinners, things like that. So you are truly minimalist fisherman. And this goes to show you don't need a $60,000 bass boat or a $20,000 Lund Pro V or whatever people got. You can use very minimalist equipment and have a very good time. So we do appreciate everybody's talk today. Let's see, there was one other thing I wanted to say. What was it? Lee, what was it? It was something. Well, I can't. Oh, yes, I want to mention we are recording these programs, and you can go well, excuse me, I sent out the link that Eric Weber, I don't think he's here, but Eric took it upon himself to make a site, has a link that you can go on and you can review any of the programs. The sound system is a little bit iffy right now, but Eric promised to work with me on getting the sound quality better. So if you wanted to review this program and the past two, it will be, they will be on a free Facebook site. So use that link. Anything else before we break? Yeah, Greg.
Lee, just as far as topics coming up here, next week we have a guide, Bill Wagner, who is known as the Crappie Hunter from Southern Iowa, is going to be here. Stroh and Chuck had used him, and so he said he would come and talk about crappie. And then the next week, I guess, is Easter. And then the week after that, we were going to talk about the Holiday Island trip that many of us are taking. But in the meantime, a guy with the Iowa Walleye Challenge through Jeff Kopaska wants to talk about a walleye. We don't even know any details, but it's a walleye tournament through the summer of 22.
Basically, it's from May 1st through June.
Through June,
And
okay.
It's called My Catch, and what the fellow's trying to do is to generate some data on the size, the whatever of walleye in the state of Iowa. And it's a virtual tournament, he calls it. And you have to think it's $25 to enter. And then you take pictures of the fish on a measuring board, return them. It's not, you don't go to a site with other people to fish. You can do it on your own.
Okay.
And, but anyway, he's going to do a Zoom presentation that day. Yeah, Danny.
One thing, not fish related, if you're an Iowa State football fan, you'll be able to the practice this afternoon is at the Ames High School football stadium. It's at 5 o'clock. It's open to the public. There's no charge. So if you want to preview and see what players they've grown in stature since last fall or talent, it's an opportunity. Next week, it's going to be at Gilbert on Friday. And the Friday after that, I think it's east in Des Moines. So heads up on that. It's going to be 50-some degrees, so it's not going to be
okay.
Did you hear about the head of the Iowa DNR getting a citation for not having a fishing license?
Yeah, Stan brought up the head of the Iowa DNR got picked up for not having a fishing license. Not good. You want to finish? Yeah, hey, everybody, listen.
So in the late part of, we've got a list of agenda items through mid-July, but out in June, there's 2 or 3 open dates. We intentionally left them open. And I wanted to comment that the 3 gentlemen that gave a session this morning, it's very, very well done. And they gave on a topic that they knew something about. I would also say if you have any interest in doing one of these sessions, doesn't have to be with something that you're intimately familiar with. You can do something, you can do a little bit of research. It doesn't take that much work. I've got a whole list of topics. I got a bunch of things. If you'd like to be a presenter, I think it really helps the club to have somebody new and present. But if you have especially if you have a topic you're very familiar with, just let Lee or myself know, Steve or Stroke, excuse me. And even if you don't understand a lot about a topic, but you're interested in it, give it a shot. Try to do a little presentation, do a little research, and we're not all experts in everything, but having a variety of people doing presentations, I think, is important. So anyway, we're kind of got a fair number of topics out through the mid-July. Then the balance of the summer into the fall, we don't have anything set yet, so.
Okay.
But I think the crappie hunter, we ought to try to be well represented here next week and give him a good audience.
Stroh or Chuck, do you want to tell about your experience with him, so generate a little interest here?
Yeah, it's the first time ever that I've used a 12-foot rod. And we primarily fish on brush piles with him down at Red Rock. And he knows how to do it. And we had, very good success, really nice crappies, a lot bigger than I ever catch. So yeah, it was good. He also knows raft, but he really wanted us to go to raft with him. And we just didn't have the time, because you have to go down the night before, that type of thing. But and he's really good in the boat. I mean, he's got a gift of gab and knows his stuff. And I enjoyed it immensely. Chuck and I think had a very good time with him that day. I don't know what comments you have, but
Yeah,
he definitely has opinions on crappie fishing. I mean, he definitely does. And, he does not use fluorocarbon leaders, and we use 14-pound, 15-pound braid hooked directly on a jig. And by God, we caught fish doing that. So, I mean, it's a different in that relationship. So anyway.
And he also uses live scope, is that my understanding?
Yeah.
he has a really interesting boat that I would call a large Boston whaler. And in the nice part is you have 2 seats up front. And so you're sitting watching live scope, watching the brush pile. And he's behind you, pull the rod up with a fish, swing it back. He takes the fish off, puts a minnow on, and you just go right back to fishing. He said, hopefully he wears sleeves when he comes, and he may not. He's a Southern Iowa boy that spends a lot of time on the water. Interesting guy. He's got a lot of stories and that kind of thing.
Okay. Well,
Neil Goppinger also hired him this last summer after we were down there, and he went to rafting with me. Yeah, and his granddaughter.
well, we'll have his presentation next week. Let's see. You had a comment?
I was just gonna ask how many people in this room would turn themselves in for.
Oh.
fishing violation.
Is that what he did?
That's what she did. She was over on the Mississippi.
Oh, it's a she.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
realized that her auto renewal hadn't kicked in or whatever for credit card thing or whatever. It was just like, did she get caught first? And this was her agreement to call in and give herself a ticket.
Okay.
She turned herself in like 2 weeks after the event happened.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else this morning? We'll have breakfast out at West Hy-Vee for anybody that wants to have breakfast. And otherwise, we'll meet back here next Friday, 8 a.m.
Presentation by you folks that have.
Yeah.
What you are.
Didn't have to talk much, so that was good.
Last